Alright guys, so today I'm going to be walking you through my 3-3 Banshee Lonestar tank DPS build. Now as requested in my previous build videos comment sections, there will not be any named items incorporated into this build. It is extremely easy to acquire and very rewarding in both PvP and PvE. Now for a variety of reasons the DPS meter is misleading. I'm going to go over that when I talk about my weapons. But your DPS is actually much higher than what is displayed here. But your toughness is about on point. 462,000 before any additional buffs, before any additional mitigation, is going to mean that you can survive very well both in solo and group play, and is something that is almost my pick for the best DPS build for PvP in patch 1.5. But it's still kind of up in the air, and while I do consider this build to be extremely rewarding, I'm not going to tag it with that title just yet. As a quick overview of what the build is based around, the main interacting mechanics are going to be multiplicative damage to targets out of cover through both the Banshee 3-piece set bonus, as you can see there, and the military LED-6 light machine gun with built-in damage to targets out of cover, and then through the acquisition of the 3-piece Lonestar talent, an additional 8% LMG damage. Now we are using a 3-3 of Lonestar Banshee. I'm going to go over every single individual piece of gear here, but the main points for the actual main stat rolls are going to be firearms over 4790. As you can see here, Brutal requires 4790 to unlock. And then after that, everything is spec'd into stamina, as well as everything being rolled to armor to increase your toughness to this fairly high number that you see here. To start with, we have this Lonestar vest. Now, it's very important to note that I have chosen Lonestar for the vest, backpack, and knee pads, but you do not need to replicate this. As long as you maintain the 3-3 ratio, it does not matter which individual gear pieces they are. Now, talking about the vest in particular, for major attributes, we have EDR and armor. Armor is the critical component here. For minor attributes, I have ammo capacity. That's a good roll. It's a quality of life thing, but it's kind of circumvented in importance by the fact that for the 2-piece bonus of Lonestar, I have 100% ammo capacity. With these combined and on my backpack, I will be able to carry over 2,000 rounds, which ensures that I will basically never run out of ammo. It's a great quality of life improvement, especially in the Dark Zone. This is a decently rolled stamina piece for my vest, and like I said before, after firearms 4790 is achieved, everything else is going to be spec'd into stamina. Next up, we have our Lonestar backpack. Now, it's very important to note that through the acquisition of a very high firearms roll, I am able to unlock all of my different gun talents requiring firearms without any additional mods. Through 2 high firearms rolls, in particular something over about 1240 between both of them, on average, you will be able to unlock your firearms talents without rolling any additional mods or any other gear pieces. So 2 is the magic number as long as you have decent rolls, and I would recommend finding a piece of gear where you can re-roll the main stat until you have over 1230, 1240, 1245, etc. And between the 2 of them can unlock 4790. For major attributes, I have 821 armor. That is critical for increasing toughness. That's a very, very good bonus to roll. There's nothing better in that slot as of right now. And for minor attributes, I have disrupt resistance. I could roll ammo capacity, but again, because the 2-piece bonus of Lonestar, I do not need it, and disrupt resistance is going to help me tremendously because my heal is an important part of this build. Next up, we have our Lonestar Kneepads. Now, there's a couple key things to look for when choosing Kneepads for a build. The first is a high main stat roll of your choice. In this case, I've opted for stamina. The second is a major attribute of armor. I would prefer to have about 145 additional armor here, but 1100 doesn't hurt, and it will fulfill my purposes. And the third, and I would actually venture the most important thing to have built right into a piece of gear before you re-roll it, is enemy armor damage in the minor attribute slot, since it does now have a direct impact on PvP. Moving on to our Banshee pieces, I will start with the mask, and it's important to note that this is my second piece of firearms gear. It is over 1200, 1211 in fact, and between this and my backpack, I again am able to unlock all of my gun talents without any additional firearms mods. For major attribute, I have opted to go with critical hit chance. That boosts my efficiency in PvP. However, if I were to be using this in PvE as a dedicated build in that regard, I would switch this over to damage to elites. However, skill power is also going to be potent as it will increase the amount of healing that your booster shot does and overall decrease your cooldowns in a variety of situations. For a minor attribute, the best in slot that you can run here is enemy armor damage, again because it directly translates to PvP and has a large and noticeable impact on PvE as well. Moving on to our Banshee Shadow gloves, it's important to note that there is a great combination of major attributes for gloves when you are speccing into a DPS build. Now, talking about the main stat, I have 1231 in stamina. That's a great roll. I have opted to reroll this multiple times until I could achieve that, and I would recommend having over 1200 bare minimum in all categories, like I say in every build video. Over 1250 if you can possibly get it. That will boost your efficiency quite a bit, but 1231 is going to be great for my purposes. For major attributes, I have LMG damage because I am going to be using an L86. I have critical hit chance and critical hit damage. That is perfect for this build. However, if you are going to be using this as a dedicated PvE build, I would recommend switching out critical hit damage for damage to elites. That would be much more potent and give a much greater yield, especially when fighting the hardest enemies in the game from an NPC standpoint. Last up for gear, we have our holster. Now this is a very straightforward item in any build. What you want to achieve is the highest possible main stat rolls across the board, and then armor is a major attribute. I don't have very good rolls in terms of firearms and electronics. I have close to 1200 in each, and I would aim for over 1200 or over 1250 for a god roll, but I have a perfect stamina roll of 1272, and that is beautiful for this build. That's going to allow me to increase my toughness significantly, and overall is a great pickup. Moving on to our weapon, we have a military L86 LSW light machine gun. Now it's important to note that because of your high ammo capacity, you will not be using a secondary pretty much ever with this build. It's a very potent combination to have a light machine gun with the damage to targets out of cover and the Banshee, so you will always be using this L86 if you can find one similar to mine. Likewise, however, you can switch this out for any other light machine gun. If you like the MG5, feel free to use an MG5. If you like the M60, feel free to use an M60. The important factor is the light machine gun archetype. Now for base damage, as you can see, I have 18.2, which is decent. However, it's nowhere near the actual potential of the build. For RPM, since it is an L86, it has 610 plus 32, which is great because of my magazine. For mag size, I have 62 in total, but the base mag size on the L86 is 30. Now the L86, and the reason I've chosen to run with it, is similar to an assault rifle. It is a magazine-loaded light machine gun and functions very similarly to an assault rifle. It's something that I prefer in PvP, and it's something, since I constantly reload my gun, is going to serve me a lot better than any sort of belt-fed light machine gun. For talents, I have Brutal, Unforgiving, and Competent. Competent is essential. Unforgiving is a great talent to run, especially on console, and especially with a light machine gun, because over the time that you are face trading with an enemy and you are losing health, you will increase your damage, allowing you to win more face trades, and because of your high toughness, you are going to be reliably operating under 2 bars or under 1 bar of health, and then proccing specific bonuses at will to win individual gunfights. Brutal is a really great talent if you can land the headshots, but something else like Vicious here would also serve your purposes, so it does not have to be replicating all 3 of these talents in this specific order. However, Unforgiving and Competent are what I would advise for a gun like this and a build like this. Talking about the modifications very quickly, the most important is magazine size, reload speed, rate of fire. I think that's a very, very potent magazine to run, especially rate of fire and magazine size in this order, with mag size being over 100%. For the optic, I would prefer headshot damage, but critical hit chance does not hurt, and I do have some headshot damage on there. For a muzzle, always headshot damage. That's going to drastically increase the amount of damage you can deal to enemy players and NPCs, especially when stagger is involved to NPCs. And for an underbarrel, since I am constantly reloading my gun, similar to how I would with an SMG since 1.1, I never broke that habit. I'm going to run with reload speed. I think that's very, very potent. To gloss over my other weapons very quickly, we have a Navy MP5N. I will never be using this, and you can run whatever you'd like in your secondary slot. It can be a sniper, a shotgun, etc. It really doesn't matter. I've opted to run this, but again, it doesn't even have all the modifications on it because I will never be using this in PvP. I will always be using my L86. And then for a pistol, it is nice if you are participating in PvP to have something with harmful on your pistol so you can bleed the enemies. However, this is just the 93R that I have left over from a previous build, and again, I will not be using it in pretty much any encounter. It has Cool-Headed and Talented. You do not need these talents. I would recommend harmful, but it's not necessary. And again, your primary gun is going to be your L86 or your similar light machine gun if you are using a different archetype. I will never be using my secondary or my pistol. Very quickly before demonstration and a gameplay showcase, I have opted to run Scrambler, and I will always run this in the Dark Zone. However, in dedicated PvE, you can switch this for Tactical Scanner, and then for my heal, I have opted to run Booster Shot to increase my damage further, as well as my damage resistance. Now, a very easy change, and some players will opt for this, is to run Overdose and receive an Overheal. That is just as viable. However, you will be sacrificing the damage mitigation and the increased damage, and that is one of the better points of this build. Moving on to talents very quickly. Again, if you are in a squad, you want to run Triage. Absolutely. Very potent talent. Critical save is important to the build. It's essential for any build, in my opinion, but here it is especially important. And then we have Combat Medic if you are in a squad. Again, you definitely want to run this. You can switch that out to Strike Back if you are solo. That is a very easy change to make. And then switch out Triage for One is None if you are opting to run solo again. And then the fourth talent, and this is critical in all areas, is On the Move. This can be triggered on enemy downed agents very easily. It can be triggered on enemy NPCs very easily in a variety of areas. And 30% reduced incoming damage is a big deal for 10 seconds. It's just going to further increase the amount of mitigation that you have and is very viable for the build. Wrapping up the gear discussion, we have all of our different mods. It's very important to note that once our firearms has been achieved at 4790, unlocking everything, we have stamina with armor on every single mod in every single slot on all of my pieces of gear. So 2 in my chest piece, I have an additional 1 in my mask, I have 1 more in my knee pads, and then I have 1 more on my backpack. And then for every single performance mod, I have opted, since I probably will be running this build solo most of the time, but even in a group setting, I will be the one using Pulse probably. I have opted to run Pulse critical hit chance in every single slot that I can find, so when the Pulse does proc on an enemy, I will be gaining significantly increased critical hit chance against them, thus boosting my DPS even further. And then in one slot, since I did not have 4 of them, I have Pulse critical hit damage. That's going to wrap up all of my different mods, and now I'm going to showcase in the firing range a little bit of why the build functions the way that it does. For a bit of a controlled demonstration before kicking it over to some live gameplay, I would like to draw attention to your weapon's base damage. Now the first thing to note is that it's not very impressive currently with no bonuses active. 18.2, while not shabby, is something that is not really going to turn any heads. It is powerful enough to drop enemy players, it is powerful enough to drop enemy NPCs, but it's not something that's going to absolutely shred. Now as soon as you pop Booster Shot and also Proc Competent, you're going to see that your damage increases to 22.4. However, this does not reflect the 13% bonus damage to targets out of cover from your light machine gun, and it also does not reflect the multiplicative damage, multiplying again against that, of 10% damage to targets out of cover from Banshee. Those are not reflected on your base damage gun meter statistics. They are very powerful, and they will allow for massively increased damage against enemy players. Also, what is not reflected there is the fact that while you are face tanking, and while they are probably not able to drop you because you do have very high toughness with this build, you are going to be activating Unforgiving in some capacity during pretty much every encounter, whether it be 10% or 25% due to 2 missing health segments. Both are going to be extremely powerful. I have crit enemy agents for well over 26,000 reliably in gunfights. I have been able to drop enemy agents while they kind of frantically flailed for their lives, and I've heard them in game chat talking about how they are baffled at the amount of damage that you can deal with this build over a short period of time, especially in burst damage situations. Alright, so before kicking it over to some PvP gameplay, I wanted to show the interaction between all the different mechanics that make you as tanky as you can be. Those are critical save, on the move, booster shot, etc. When they are all interacting, you're going to achieve over 3 million effective toughness. And this is quite easy to do during the course of any one gunfight. As you can see here, I have over 3 million. That is proccing critical save, booster shot, on the move. Again, quite easy. As soon as I pop a super, I'm at 4.6 million effective toughness. That is very tanky. It's something that can help you withstand for the full signature duration, an entire team attacking you easily, as well as the fact that even without the signature, I was at 3 million. So here I actually launch a frag grenade in tandem with the explosive damage. I'm able to drop 2 agents extremely quickly. If I were to hit fire and move around them, I would have procced on the move and become even more tanky. As soon as you land headshots, again, you're absolutely able to melt enemy agents. The damage to targets out of cover, since it is active pretty much all the time during PvP encounters, is going to be invaluable. And enemy agents hardly ever take cover. They hardly ever utilize things that give them bonuses for taking cover. So it's going to be active all the time. As well as the fact that, especially on console, which is, what I play on Xbox One, people face trade extremely often, which means that Unforgiving is going to be active and help you win gunfights a lot of the time. You can do mass amounts of damage, especially when you get to that last health segment. You're proccing not only 13% bonus damage to targets out of cover from your LMG, but 10% to targets out of cover from Banshee, plus the 8% from Lonestar, plus the potentially 25% from Unforgiving, plus potentially the 15% and 10% from both Booster and Competent. Stacking all these things on top of each other allow you to achieve just extremely unexpected amounts of DPS with an L86 or with an LMG. It's very powerful. I would recommend this for solo play. It does have my seal of approval for PvP and PvE. It is extremely tanky, has an extremely high amount of damage, and someone with better aim than what I have can use this to devastating effect. I don't always have the best aim in the world. Everybody knows this. Someone that lands more headshots, someone that uses their grenades in better placing, for better placement, is going to achieve better clips, better offensive capabilities. They're going to be able to take on larger groups of players than I am. But even with this build and my, my aim that is sort of lacking, I was able to go on solo manhunts on my stream without issue. I was able to survive multiple agents shooting me without a problem at all. Mass amounts of damage. I was able to burst down a lot of enemy agents who were completely unprepared for the amount of damage that I was dealing. It was proclaimed a few times. I was actually in voice chat here during this live stream that, you know, they were completely surprised by how much damage that I was dealing, and they were, you know, so shocked that they were yelling out loud how they were so surprised at the damage that I was dealing. I have one up here near the end of this clip where there is an agent who, just like I said, is extremely shocked about how much damage there is. Again, it relies on snapshotting. It relies on making sure that you can achieve all your different bonuses, you know, with proper timing to have huge amounts of base damage, huge amounts of crit damage, especially when you have high base damage like that on a headshot. You are going to be able to achieve, you know, really high damage numbers. It does compete with Alpha Bridge builds. A lot of people aren't expecting it. You know, when they see an LMG, they don't picture that you're going to be dealing as much damage as them, especially if they're running just kind of a generic cookie cutter Alpha Bridge assault rifle build. This can absolutely trade with them. This can out-trade those builds in pretty much every situation that I've encountered. Again, very powerful. I like the increased survivability. It's a build that I don't typically run. I've been running glass cannons for a long time now, and this style of build where you have really high toughness is extremely fun, and it's something that I look forward to using more, especially on live streams and, you know, in various events and playing with viewers.
I don't understand why he's doing so much fucking damage.
There you have it. That's not something I've heard very much recently. It's very good to start hearing that again and know that the build that you're using is working and extremely powerful. So if you want to support the channel, please check out the links below. And as always, guys, have a nice night.